folks. Welcome back to the 23rd lecture in this monthly series at Meat Creek. Pretty amazing this has gone on so long. And in the time that I've been doing this, we've had a lot of different nights here. Sometimes it's a little bit of story time with Uncle Jack. Sometimes it's Uncle Jack is really sleep deprived and is just sort of rambling at you about what colors mean in Old Norse or something. And then last month we tried something a little bit different, which I got pretty good feedback about. Sort of, let's get into the head of this culture and let's think about how they think about things really differently than we do. And so last month I talked about time, and this month I want to talk about space. Although not necessarily in the sense of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Although, side note, you know that I did translate Star Wars into Old Norse. I see some miserable people nodding, and I know you're miserable because you know about it. Yeah, that's I can talk about that at some point, maybe. No, what I want to talk about is how the Norse cosmos is arranged in mythology, maybe a little bit how they think of the physical world that we inhabit being arranged. In January of this year, I took a class in map making. It was sold through Uncommon Goods. It's taught by this guy named Brendan Gorber, really cool guy. I did actually an interview with him on my YouTube channel. He's a poet and cartographer, and he makes maps of concepts and works of literature. So for example, he'll make a map of Walt Whitman. He'll make a map of Edgar Allan Poe. He'll make a map of his favorite 20th century poets, things like that. And it sounds strange, but when you look at it, there's this sort of dreamy quality to this very Tolkien-esque kind of map that he lays out on a big canvas, and you can sort of see the flow of someone's thoughts and motifs and things like that. It's really clever. I liked it a lot, and I wound up drawing my own map of the Norse cosmos, actually inspired by his style for the second edition of the Poetic Edda. But I've continued to think about, which available here at Meat Creeker as well as other fine establishments, but get it at Meat Creeker if you haven't yet. Also good fine meat from Meat Creeker. But I've continued to think about this, and as I've been translating the prose Edda, I've realized that the typical notion of how the Norse mythic cosmos is arranged is wrong. The contrarian notion of how the Norse mythic cosmos is arranged is wrong. And we really have to kind of open our minds in a different way to appreciate this. So to put it in meme terms, broke, there are 9 worlds. Woke, they're actually realms, not worlds, and the number 9 is just a cultural signifier. It's not actually a count. Bespoke, none of this meant anything to anybody 1,000 years ago. They wouldn't know what you were talking about if you asked them what the 9 worlds were. So let's get into this a little bit, and let's start with story time, because I've got a short story for you that may be familiar, but that I want to kind of mine for some interesting details that it gives us about this stuff. In Snorri's prose, he tells that early on, I've actually written out the quote in my translation here. It was very early in time still, in the gods' original dwelling, back when the gods had set up Midgard and made Valhalla. Okay. The use of the phrase set up Midgard may sound a little bit strange, but usually Midgard refers to not the realm in which we live, but the fence around it. And I'll come back to that, because it's kind of interesting. But also the gods' original dwelling. So they have not yet fenced it in. That is what makes it Asgard, the drawing that we know. Asgard is how people usually pronounce that in English. Is that Asgard, just like Midgard, really is the wall around it and not the realm in which they dwell. And at this point in their early history, this man, he's just called a man when he first shows up on the scene, shows up and says that he will build the gods a wall so strong that it will prevent their enemies, the quote, hill Jotuns and frost Jotuns, from coming over it or breaking it, even if they have come over Midgard. And I think that's kind of interesting phrasing there. They will not get over it even if they have gotten over Midgard. So apparently, both of these walls are between the Jotuns and where the gods live. They have to come through us before they get to the gods, right? I think that's kind of an interesting notion already. So we could think of, here's a border, here's a border, and then out here are the enemies. And I'm going to refine this map as we go, but here's sort of a simple notion of this that we can get from just that. He says he will build them this wall high enough and strong enough that the Jotuns can't get over it in 3 seasons. Now that's usually how people translate this. This actually comes back to a time point like we were talking about last time. They don't talk about 4 seasons, but rather about 2. And the word that people usually translate season is a little bit misleading. The word in Old Norse is misere, which really is just half year. So winter is half of the year and summer is half of the year. They don't really talk about spring and fall as distinct seasons from winter and summer. So what he's really saying is he will build them a wall in a year and a half. Okay, so the gods kind of negotiate this down and they say, well, that's a lot given that what you want, he says he wants in return the sun and the moon and Freya. Right, the Jotuns always wanted to take Freya from the gods. And the gods say, well, that's a lot to give you for a year and a half of work, but if you can do it in 6 months, if you can do it in just 1 misere, right, start the first day of winter, which is usually late October. It's a lunar reckoning, so basically the full moon in October. And if you have it done before the first day of summer, which would be in late April, then you will get that prize. But they stipulate no man, that is no humanoid, can help you. And he says, okay, but I want the help of my horse, Svalofar, which is a fun name, and occurs in a few variants. Sometimes you'll see it spelled this way, or this way. And the gods are not sure they want to let him have the help of his horse. This horse looks pretty awesome. But Loki hears about this and says, no, let him have the horse. Let him use his horse. So the gods say, okay, he can have his horse. Yeah, I can tell some of you know the story.
That's an eagle.
I guess he likes to look at it. I don't know. But the builder gets to work, and his horse at night drags rocks from his quarry to the building site, and the gods agree that the horse really is doing twice as much work as the Jotun is. And the Jotun has had, the Old Norse text by Snorri says, strong witnesses and many oaths to ensure his treaty and his agreement with the gods. And we're told that this is so because no Jotun would feel safe in Asgard unless he had strong witnesses and many oaths from the gods, because otherwise he'd be afraid that Thor would kill him. But we are told that Thor is in the east fighting Jotuns. Well, that's usually how this is translated. But interestingly, the Old Norse text, and I want to put this in a corner so I can remember to come back to it, says not that he is necessarily just in the east, but he is on the eastern road fighting trolls. Okay, so is Jotunheimar east of the gods? I'll come back to this. So Jotun builds for 6 months, and then we get to 3 days before the summer starts, and he is very nearly done, except for the gate. And the gods are starting to sweat and pull their collars a little bit. Right? Oh man, how did we agree that we were going to give this guy the sun and the moon and Freya if he got this done in 6 months? Because it looks like we're about to have to give him the sun and the moon and Freya. What are we going to do? And the gods put their heads together and they say, who's responsible for this? And eventually someone pipes up, it doesn't say who. It says, well, you know who's responsible for this? It's the one who's responsible for most evil, and that's Loki. And the gods agree, yeah, it's Loki. It's Loki's fault because I guess he's the one who said that you should have the horse. And so they say, Loki, we are going to do awful things to you, doesn't specify what, if you don't make sure that this guy ends up breaking his end of the bargain. Right? The gods don't want to break their own oaths, but they want to kind of force him out of his keeping his oath. And so, sure enough, the next morning, the Jotun gets to work, and he's got his horse all reined up and attached to the wagon or sleigh or whatever he's pulling rocks in. And out of the forest nearby, and I want to take a side note and say, note, there are forests outside of the enclosure of Asgard. Right? So Asgard, the enclosure where the gods live, is located on some kind of physical plane, surrounded by something that is by definition not Asgard, that includes forests. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of interesting and a little bit different than people usually think about it. It's on a planet. This planet. Okay, come back. So out of the forest comes a mare. And we are told that the stallion went crazy. Udisk, actually the verb that's formed from the same word that Odin's name is, crazy one. So he went crazy when he realized what kind of horse this was. And he broke free of his traces and chased after it, and the smith chased after the stallion, but he was never able to catch him. And sure enough, he realized he was never going to catch the stallion, and thus was not going to be able to pull enough stone, and thus was not going to be able to finish his wall on time. And having been thwarted in his effort to make the wall inside of 6 months, the Jotun went into a Jotun rage. This is something that the Jotuns, the enemies of the gods, sometimes do. The gods also go into god rage, also. I don't know exactly what this means. But weirdly, when he goes into his Jotun rage, the gods recognize that he's a Jotun. Right? Which is a nice reminder that the Jotuns don't look different from the gods. Right? They're all just humanoids. It's like, I don't know what family you're from necessarily, just looking at you. So once they realize that this is a Jotun, and what did they think he was? I'm not really sure what they thought. Like, oh, it's just a human dude? I don't know. But they put up the Thor signal, and which I guess is probably a hammer, spotlighted in the sky. Probably using a fine light, like Marauder Mini 2. Another sponsor. Anyway, so he shows up, and Snorri does a little bit of Old Norse humor. He says that Thor decided to pay him his wages, and it was not the sun and the moon. Rather, it was a blow from his hammer, which denied the Jotun the ability to live in Jotunheimar anymore. I.e., he went to live in hell. And he died. We're also told that 11 months later, the mare, which was Loki, of course, gave birth to an 8-legged horse, and that was Sleipnir, Odin's horse, and that is where Sleipnir's. This is Sleipnir's origin story too. But the reason that I begin tonight with this little, pretty well-known story is that it emphasizes that we are not looking at something that is at all like the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of where these realms are. Right? These are not different planets. These are all places that are on, in principle, one planet. But I don't think that it looks a lot like a Tolkien map either, really. So let's see if we can identify where this whole 9 worlds business comes from, what those 9 worlds or realms maybe are, and then actually maybe how they really arrange this. Questions, remarks, criticisms, complaints, manifestos at this juncture. All right. So there's a really well-known trope in discussing Norse myth that says there are 9 worlds, or more and more, and I think this is a good thing. People say 9 realms now in English, and I like that a lot better. It's not quite perfect, but it's better. And what is this translating? Well, the Old Norse is Newheimar. And you may note, this is 9, Heim is home, just like stain is stone, bane is bone, etc. There's a very regular correspondence between these sounds and Old Norse and English cognates. So really, at its most literal level, this is 9 homes. But even home may not be exactly right, because home, in the sense that we use it in English, or in the sense that the cognate is used in German, Heim, basically the same, Swedish Hem, we mostly are thinking about a house, or maybe like the area right around a house. But we might note that in the oldest well-attested Germanic language, Gothic, Hamps, the cognate word is village, not house. So it's come to mean house, it's come to mean a smaller thing than it originally meant in languages like Norse and English and German. In Gothic, by the way, if you want to talk about house, you talk about the Rasen, which we have one tiny little remnant of in English, ransack. When you sack a house, right? Which, by the way, is a borrowing from Norse, which preserves this word for house too. So if you look at Gothic Hamps, or there's plenty of other cognates to this elsewhere in the Indo-European language family. I wrote down a few because I thought it was kind of neat, actually. Greek ktizo means I populate or I inhabit, from the same root. Sanskrit kishen means he inhabits, he dwells. Lithuanian kiemas means village, just like the Gothic. So this goes back to an old word for a dwelling, but not the house itself. Probably more like the region, the village, the community, if you will. So I think when we look at Niu Hamar, maybe weirdly enough, a better way to think about it is not even 9 realms, but like 9 villages. Okay. But I'm also not really sure that the 9 worlds or villages has anything to do with where we live. I'm not sure we live on one of the 9 villages. Okay, this is actually my major galaxy brain thing for you right now. I think we may have actually misunderstood this as being applied to things like Midgard and Asgard and Hell. So where do they ever talk about 9 worlds in the Eddas? There's a really famous quote in Völuspá, the poem about the beginning of the world in Ragnarok, in stanza 2, where the witch says, Ekman jotna orum borna for forðumik för da hoffu. Niu manek heima niu ividur mjotvid maron purmo nevon. She's talking about the beginning. She says, I remember Jotuns, so-called giants, anti-gods, born early on, those who early on had raised me. I remember 9 worlds, realms, villages, whatever you want to do with this, Niu Hamar, 9 Jotun women, the great fate tree below the earth, probably meaning Yggdrasil when it's still a seed. That's generally how I've interpreted what she's saying there. Okay, but this is the creation. She's remembering 9 realms then. Okay. That is one reference to 9 worlds or 9 realms in the Poetic Edda. There's one more. It actually is a lot less common of an expression than people think. And I think that the other one is a bit of a clue as to what's actually going on here. It's in Vafthrudnismal, one of the poems where Thor has a trivia, Odin has a trivia contest against Vafthrudnir and Jotun. They trade questions and answers about the beginning and end of the world. And Vafthrudnir says, do you like the Old Norse? Does it add atmosphere?
Always.
Okay. Frå jotna runen och allra gåla ek kan säga satt. Tvea tverven hevi ek heim komet. Niu kom ek heiman för nivelhel nevan. Hinne döja or helju hallir. I can tell truly about the Jotun's mysteries and the gods' mysteries because I have come to every hame, or every home, realm, world, village, whatever this we should do with this word. I have come to 9 Hamar, worlds, realms, villages, whatever, below hell. Men die into there from hell. So, when the witch in Boleslaw says she remembers 9 realms, and when he says there are 9 realms that men die into out of hell, I think she may actually just be saying she remembers, like, hell comes before where we live. Right? In a sense, death is sort of preceding life. This kind of goes back to something we were talking about last time with the not now preceding the now. Maybe nothing has died yet, but past and future are more like than they are to the present. Something we talked about a little bit last month, talking about the Norse conception of time. So when people try to count out what the 9 worlds are, I think we're kind of making a mistake. That the witch is not saying there are 9 realms, so we could say it's Midgard, or Asgard, or Hell, or Jotunheim, because it's actually really, really hard to figure out what those 9 are. Right? I can figure out maybe 7, maybe 8, but it's really hard to figure out like what the 9th is, or something, really even what the 8th is. I'm going to talk about what these might be in a minute if there are any. But I think we've kind of got a red herring here, that we're being misled into thinking these are the 9 realms that exist now. I think it's the 9 realms of the dead, is really what she's saying. The 9 realms of the not now. Okay, you can agree or disagree, but I think that it's a possibility. So, what are then the realms that we do know about in the now? And even worse, where are they relative to each other? For that, I will attempt to draw in a minute. And there are no refunds for not liking my minute. Questions, comments, criticisms, complaints, manifestos.
How do you know it's not like 9 families?
What?
How is it not 9 families?
Okay. It's not impossible. The Slavic cognates to this word, if you think about something like, isn't the Ukrainian cognate sima or something like that, is family. That's from the same root as home. It's, the Indo-European root is K, which is something like to lie together. So home, your village, your house, these are things that lie together. The house is where the family lies together. The community is houses that lie together. That's the basic sense of the word. 9 families, maybe, but then you're looking at a meaning that the word would have had long before these texts were written down, which is not impossible. Interesting thought. But the word does not typically mean family. It should be pointed out in Old Norse. So there's 3 realms that we can unambiguously say are part of the Norse mythic cosmos. Where the gods live, where we live, where bad things live, and then, actually I can add a 4th pretty unambiguously, where the dead dwell. These are not hard to figure out as part of the cosmos. Now, where they go together is a little bit harder to figure out. If you go online and you ask, I don't know, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, like what are the 9 worlds of Norse mythology, I'm sure it will give you an answer. And I'm sure that the answer will be informed by mostly 19th, 20th, 21st century speculation rather than reading the Eddas, because I don't think that those things are their sources typically have read the Eddas. But often they'll add things like Vanaheimr, where the Vanir are said to dwell, Olfheimr, where the elves dwell. Weirdly enough, Svartolfheimr, dark elf realm. Sometimes you'll see them add Húsfelsheimer, Basically, it seems like whenever people try to count up to 9, they just take every word that ends in hammer and just try to throw it up here as if it's equally important to these, and I don't think any of these are equally important to these 4. There's also, if you read in the Poetic Edda, the 4th poem, Reading in the Small, you're going to read about probably 15, 16 additional places that have names that end in hammer. Are all of those distinct worlds or realms or planets? I really don't think so. Most of them seem to be located in Oscar. So hammer can't be relied on to just mean like planet or realm or kingdom. It can mean something a lot smaller. It can mean house.
What about Niflheimr?
Yeah, Nibelheim, I see people say, although really the way that that's usually spelled is Nibelhel. But that just seems to be identical. It seems to be another name for hell. It's like cloudy hell. Nibelhel was like cloud. It's German Nebels. Yeah. Same word, or almost the same word in German. But I don't think these are like equally big parts of how everything goes together. Okay. If we go looking, and I did, for all the places where these are mentioned, it's always like 1 or 2 times. Right? It's actually kind of surprising how little any of these get brought up. Elf home is mentioned 1 time in the Poetic Edda when we hear that it was given to Freyr early on in the history of the gods as a toothing gift. So Freyr owns the Keebler Elf factory or something. I don't know, that was his inheritance as a kid. Something like that. Maybe he owns Sam's factory, I'm not sure. Snorri says he quotes the stanza from Grimswald, but he adds only that the light elves live there, and he says the dark elves live underground. That would make Svartalfahamr just another word for what's underground, but maybe underground but not hell. By the way, Svartalfahamr itself only comes up twice, as far as I can tell. Both times, it's because the gods send a messenger to dwarves. So both these occurrences are in the prose Edda. One is when the gods want to send Skirnir to some dwarves to get them to make a chain that will be strong enough to bind the wolf Fenrir. It says they sent him to Svartalfahamr to the dwarves to get them to make it. So apparently Snorri's understanding dwarves equals dark elves. And then same thing in Skaldskaparmal and the Poetic and the Prosa, when Snorri is telling the story about the Volsungs, he says that Loki goes to Svartalfahamr to browbeat a dwarf. So it seems like dark elves equals dwarves, or dwarves are a kind of dark elf or something. It's hard to figure out exactly what the taxonomy of that is. I do not know the Linnaean classification of Norse mythological species. It would be a very difficult thing to figure out. Muspelsamur is something that's mentioned in the creation myth. This is the hot part of the primordial chaos. Right? There's a hot part and there's a cold part. The cold part is Nibelhel or Nibelheimr. So the dead wind up in hell, which is, I guess, the part of the primordial cosmos that remains cold. Right? It's underground, so it's not been heated by the sun. And then Vanaheimr, actually often discussed in the plural. So Vanaheimar. Not mentioned very much. It's mentioned as the birthplace of Njordr, right? The god who's sort of the prototypical member of the Vanir, him and his kids, Freyr and Freya. We hear in Vafthrudensmal that Njordr was born in Vanaheimr, and that he was sent as a hostage to the gods in Ostgarder. So that does firmly establish that it's a different place, which is at least interesting. And then we have a weird little clue in Lokasenna, and this is where my horrible map drawing is going to begin, that Vanaheimr is west of Ostgarder. Because Loki says, there aren't any kids here, are there? Okay, I've got a quote.
Only on the inside.
Yeah. That's me too. In Lokasenna in the Poetic Edda, the poem where Loki insults all the gods are sitting at Aegir's hall. And Loki turns to Njordur and he says, Njordur, you were sent from here east to the gods in Asgard as a hostage, implying that Aegir's Hall is in Vanaheimar, because that's where Njordur is from. And then he adds, and the daughters of Hymir pissed in your mouth, you've tasted plenty of urine. I don't know what that has to do with where he's from. But that's one of the better that's one of the better reasons to read modern translations, because they won't be too delicate about this stuff. I can be a little bit prudish, but these texts often aren't. Okay, so I'm going to make Iceland the center of the world, and it's just going to look like a rubber duck. And Britain's going to get off worse. And probably like them, I'm going to make Scandinavia look too big. But that's fine, probably.
It's a cat.
This is
It's a dinosaur. Everything we draw turns into a dinosaur.
Is this a Rorschach test?
It's
It's my parents never really loved me.
Where's Finland? Where's Finland?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
That's pretty close.
Crap, look what I did with the...
Well, after it's done.
Whatever. This is more or less what they even know is there, right? Okay. As far as we can tell, the medieval Norse conception of how the planet looks is there is a big... How great people are filming this. There's a big ring of land, and that's what humans inhabit. Okay. They think that the Atlantic plus the Mediterranean is fully enclosed by land. I kind of didn't show that here because I made Scandinavia too much of a snakehead or whatever. But they think of it fundamentally as a ring. This is part of why probably they are not afraid to keep sailing west. Right? They do not think they're going to fall off the planet because they haven't hit the land that is the rim yet. Right? I don't necessarily know. They never say anything that makes it sound like they really understand that the Earth is round, but they also never say anything that really makes it sound like they think the Earth is flat. So I don't know exactly what to picture, but I'm going to default to kind of presenting it as flat-ish. Okay. Now, in the creation myth, we are told, hinted at in Völuspá, the first one of the Poetic Edda, and told in more detail by Snorri in the Prosa, that the realms that humans live in are surrounded by a wall. And the wall is made of the eyelashes of the original living being Ymir. Right? So I guess you can sort of pick places around the rim and put the eyelash fence. Actually, my best job of art here so far is making those kind of look like eyelash hairs, at least kind of like mine. But it is perhaps interesting to note that the wall, the eyelash hairs, are not quite at the edge of the land. Because, and this is something that it's taken me, myself, a little bit to realize, there are Jotun Heimar, there are Jotun villages on our land. They are not just outside of the outer ocean. Because when Snorri has Thor journeying to Utgard the Loki, he's in Jotunheimar before he crosses the ocean. He crosses the wall, then he's in Jotunheimar, then he crosses the ocean, and he goes like deeper into Jotunheimar. So there's kind of an inner Jotunheimar and an outer one. So we are surrounded by an ocean. Oh wow, I can color code this. getting advanced. Okay, just to remind you that this is ocean around us. And then I'm going to present to you reasons that I think that Jotunheimar is not just east, but I think Jotunheimar is just completely surrounding us. I think it's a big ring. Thor travels on the eastern road. Remember I said I'll come back to that, to get to it, but I think it's actually all around, so we can kind of put it all over the place. And I'm going to rapidly run out of room for everything else, but that's okay. Chaos is probably fine for this. Okay. Questions, comments, criticisms, complaints, manifestos.
Just play the, if you're walking anywhere, like other than east, you're taking the boat, right?
Yeah.
So like if they're walking there, or
Yeah.
they're going east.
Right. From a Scandinavian perspective, it does make sense. If you are anywhere in Scandinavia, the direction you are most likely to find land is east, unless you're in Sweden. But yeah, certainly from a Norwegian perspective, and the Eddas being written in Iceland probably come from a more Norwegian than Swedish perspective. Okay. Now, Asgarder, the enclosure of the gods, is above us somewhere. One thing I am still not committed about is whether Asgarder floats above us, or is on a mountaintop above us, or here's my newest idea. This is my a little bit more galaxy brain, expand your mind stuff. I think that maybe this model should be kind of 3D. And here is my presentation to you of a sort of 3D version of this, and I have no idea if I have the artistic skills to pull this off. This is going to be a high wire act, but I will try. So when they talk about, crap, what color should I use for this? So Ymir's eyelashes make the fence around us, right? What part of Ymir makes the sky? A skull. Because they call it a dome, right? They call it the bowl of the sky. Actually, not that different from how it's talked about in Greek. But it's talked about as a bowl. Actually, in Christian tradition too, right? The firmament, I think, is considered to be a solid thing above us. Yeah. So, if this is actually a physical bowl, this is a side view of the planet. Here's us, down here. This is Midgard. I am not sure, but if this is physical, Asgarder is actually physically located on something up here, if you see what I'm saying. And I've just realized this. This is taking me a while to kind of conceptually get to. So I think Asgarder may be, up here. It's got another fence around it, or wall, that was made by the builder who got paid, or was supposed to get paid, the sun and the moon and Freya, but he didn't. And then there's actually like forests growing up here. Seems to be the physical notion of this. But then how do we get from here to here? Okay. So it's worth repeating, because this is usually not how it's presented in the big internet website of Norse mythology or whatever. When they talk about Asgarder, they're usually talking about the wall. When they talk about Midgard, they're usually talking about this wall. And then secondarily, what's inside of it. So when Snorri goes back and forth between saying that the gods are at Asgarder and the gods are Ahimni in the sky, I think he's not necessarily thinking about them as on a cloud. I think he's thinking about this as like a hill that you could somehow get to. Okay, now of course, how do you somehow get to it? Well, I'm going to annoyingly color code this further, because he says that, have any of you read the Prose Edda recently? It's actually a pretty annoyingly constructed book, but for the larger part of it where we actually get information about mythology, it's this guy Gangleri of Gilby, who's asking questions that are getting answered by Odin as a trinity high, just as high in third. And every question that he asks him, he says, "You're stupid, you haven't heard this before." Well, so Gangari says, "What is the way from Earth to Asgard, or from Midgard to Asgard?" And Odin says, "Well, maybe you're stupid and you haven't heard about this before, but surely you've seen the rainbow." He says, "Well, that's what it is." And he says it is 3 colors because, and this would be another rambling topic, in a Norse conception, the rainbow has only 3 colors, red, green, and blue. And that is the bridge from Earth to the sky, or Midgard to Asgard. So what I am assuming from this firmament dome-based conception of Asgard is that this is a bridge you can take from somewhere here to get up to some kind of like hole in the dome or something like that and get up there. Okay, but I think it only comes down inside of Midgard. I don't think that it goes to Jotunheimar because they seem to have to go through us to get to the Jotuns and vice versa. And my guess is, and I'm going to tell you why I think this in a minute, but I want to prep you for this before the intermission, for those who were interested in my weird conception of these. I think Bifrost, the rainbow, has a regular docking place, sort of, and it's on the eastern end of Asgard. So when Thor is on the eastern road, he's leaving Asgard, because the road out of it, the rainbow, goes, or leaves from the eastern side of it. I don't think that Jotunheimar is east of the gods. I think that the road is east, if you see what I'm saying. Kind of like Greeley is more east than south of Fort Collins, but you might take I-25 south, right, on your way there. Right? I think it's just the routing rather than where the destination is.
Hey folks, we'll be back to your regular presentation in a moment, but right now I'm here at Grimfrost World Headquarters Longhouse with Johan Hegg, and I just want to remind you that if you have Viking needs, you have a Viking supplier. Grimfrost really cares about getting things right, and if you need replica, well, anything, right? Shields, helmets, weapons, board games, cool t-shirts, hats, all sorts of accessories like that. You can get them at grimfrost.com together with my books, and they ship just about anywhere in the world. So check them out. It does help support the channel.
I had a great question, which is, where does this rim fall, right? Because like, how do you transfer this sort of 3D, this y-axis to this x-axis? Where do they touch? Like, is this inside of this enclosure? Is it outside of this enclosure, etc.? I don't know. But there is a rim. They do talk about the rim. And it's taken me a while, just like with all of this stuff. Folks, I've been staring at this for a quarter century. Okay, like I'm still trying to figure out, 50,000 words or whatever the edits probably are, 60,000, 70,000 words. And I've only kind of recently figured out, I think, that when they talk about the sky's rim, which by the way is probably, I guess, the inspiration for that video game Snake, that they are talking about like the bowl has a rib. Okay, question back there.
So, very early thoughts, more just a ponderance than anything, but with the fence being Emir's eyelashes, I see this as his eye, and that being roughly your x-axis, like eye level being the x-axis for your, like, dome of your skull. Perhaps the forests are eyebrows.
Well, forests are his hair, is what it says. Yeah, I see what you mean. That's interesting what you say about it being sort of eye-shaped. It actually reminds me of a poem by Robinson Jeffers, in which he describes the planet as an eye, and its pupil is the Pacific Ocean, and what it watches is not man's wars. So, cool image. There's something else? Okay, but that's interesting. and I think, and probably like very consonant with their poetry. So the rim of the sky is held up by 4 dwarves, whose names are Norse, Vestri, Estri, and Suthi, whose translations I suspect you can figure out. Northwest, east, and south. My mother has been known to complain that you're not an atheist if you say, "Oh my God," because you're implicitly acknowledging the existence of God. So I've told her that she's actually a Norse pagan because she says northwest, east, and south. Doesn't quite work. So the 4 dwarves are actually holding it up. Where do they stand? That is never clarified. I do not know whether they're standing inside Mythgarder or outside Mythgarder, or inside the ocean or outside the ocean. My guess, just based on the fact that they're sort of good aligned, is they're probably inside of Mythgarder. That probably this rim is, where's the black one? Wow, that's covered in meat.
Sorry.
Sure, it tastes better than it feels. Wow. I suspect this is outside. That the rim is inside of that. Something else. Oh, thank you. Something else that's in at some part of the rim. There is an eagle, a Jotun, that we are told is in an eagle shape, Jotuni Arnarhon, Krasfelger, or Veðurfolnir, and that he is at the northern end of the sky. They talk about the ends or corners of the sky. Now, if that's a Jotun, then he may live in Jotunheimar, so that may be beyond the fence, so he may be, out here on the northern end. There's a eagle. And his wings beat the wind into our realm from under the rim, apparently. It's kind of an interesting idea. You may also remember, if you've read Völuspá, that we are told early on, stanza 8 or something, that the sun cast its right hand across the rim of the sky, which I think is perhaps a notion that when you see the sun coming up, you're seeing it sort of peek through the rim before it starts climbing the dome. Now, this is not a perfectly logical system, right? Like most myth, it has a dream logic to it rather than a solid, scientific logic. And a big part of that is I think we should understand the sun as being outside of the dome. So it's shining onto Åsgarður and into Midgarður. That doesn't really make sense if the dome has force on it itself. Why would you be able to see through it? But again, I think dream logic rather than pure scientific logic. How many movies and TV shows and terrible books, like The Adventures of the Teen Archaeologist in the Land of the Moped, have people, it's a terrible book, have people in an underground civilization that still talk about the sun and the moon, right? Like it's a pretty common trope. We just don't think about it because we're so used to that cycle. Anyway. Okay. What else is there to say about this map? Where is hell? We talked about this a little bit last time because hell is potentially the grave, right? As soon as you're underground, you're kind of in hell. So I get the impression that in a sense, what you've got is not exactly a sphere that we live on the outside of, but a sphere that we live on a weird cross-section in the middle of. And that beneath us are other things, including, like somewhere down here, is hell. But I think that in the same way there's sort of a dream logic about how the sky works, I think there's a dream logic about how the underground works. Because remember, if you were here last month, I know I keep saying, like last time. There's so many regulars that a lot of you have come for a lot of these. I'll try to remember that not everybody comes for everything. There is a really interesting poem, and I talked about it a little bit last month, that's in the Saga of Herborn Hedra. I translated it in a book called Two Sagas of Mythical Heroes. There may be a copy here. And there's a poem in this saga where a woman has broken into her father's grave to demand a sword from him that she wanted to inherit, but he died and wasn't able to give her. And as soon as she's there, she says she is in hell. When she breaks open the grave, she calls that the gates of hell. So there's hell writ small and there's hell writ large. There's hell as kind of a kingdom of the dead. When we're not looking at the dead, who knows what they're doing underneath us, right? You know, they may be crawling from grave to grave, doing whatever, you know, who knows exactly how they're moving, but they're getting from grave to grave somehow down there. And there's sort of a arrangement of it under a queen who's also named Hel. And then, of course, Vafthrûdnir says there are 9 realms under Hel, so 9, I don't know, sub-hells. But if we diminish this language and say not world, not realm, but say village, right, 9 Hamar, then it may just be that she's saying there's 9 further places they can like dig to or go down to. I don't know. Yeah.
I was just thinking, because Hand is only accessible through Midgard, right?
It's
Like,
a
you
little
have to be on
unclear.
kind of like the human plane to actually have real ground to get into a royal mound or something like that to access any gate whatsoever.
Yeah, because if the gods dig through where they are, I think they fall a long way to us.
Exactly.
But if we dig, we can get to hell.
So, and I don't think anywhere in the Eddas it says what is beneath the ocean. So maybe,
Yeah.
like if you die in the ocean, maybe that is one of those like sub-realms of Hel, because you can only get through Hel pretty much.
Oh, I
If
see
you
what you're
die
saying.
in Midgard, but if you die in the ocean or you die in a different realm where you're not like in Midgard and people see you die,
That's an interesting
that's
thought.
when you're at different levels.
And that does make sense because Ron, the goddess of shipwrecks, is often said in Skaldic poetry to claim men who die at sea. So it could be that there's conceived to be a different, you know, there's something like, I don't know, if this is all meated up. I need a sea color. I'll use purple. If this is, you know, the interior ocean where men would die at shipwreck, maybe there's like a realm they can kind of go down into that's just the sea. They're not in hell.
Yeah, there's like
They're in the water.
it's a water bowl, and then the Midgard is like another bowl on the outside, and there's different.
Yeah, like a different, like there's actually a bowl
Yeah.
of the ocean. Yeah, so you're just saying. That's a possibility too. I mean, all of this is thought experiments because they never describe all of this in detail, but that's a really interesting thought, yeah. I like the idea. So we can picture, yeah, kind of a bowl of the ocean, and like Ron is down there somewhere, taking men who die in shipwrecks.
And then maybe looking at the Heimer as more like tribes. Maybe it's like how or where you die within those different realms. You get to different realms,
Yeah,
different tribes of Hel.
yeah, I see what you mean. So that you could think of the 9 villages one goes to from hell as being like one could be Ron's place.
Exactly.
That's a possibility. I mean, if they describe this in any more detail, I could. That's good. That's solid thinking. As far as getting to hell, the gods do it sometimes. So in the prose after Baldur dies, Odin sends Hermodr to hell. And Hermodr gets on Sleipnir, Odin's horse, and rides, he says, 9 nights through dark, deep valleys where he cannot see in order to get to hell. It doesn't say where he starts, but I imagine that if he's going to ride to hell, he's first got to come down to us, as you pointed out, because this would just be traveling through sky, apparently. But I think he's got to come down to us and then ride underground where he cannot see till he gets to wherever hell herself lives. And then in Saxo, in the history of the Danes, he does describe people going to hell, or he calls it, Hades or whatever, because he's writing in Latin. But it's also access underground, but I don't think he talks about the gods going. So at any rate, sort of a missing link of how you get from here to here, but I think you just gotta go through Midgard. Something like that.
Just curious, the number 9, do we think that's just symbolic, like a lot or something like
They use 9 all the time. 9 is the sacred number. So like Heimdallr has 9 moms, whatever that means. Right? I mean, okay. Still never figured that one out. Maybe that'll be next month. I mean, numbers don't mean numbers. Then you'll know I've really gone crazy.
that? Well, I mean, the biblical numbers too, could be like 40 days, 40 nights, just might mean a lot.
Yeah, they like 9. Yeah, right. And they like 9 a lot. Odin hangs for 9 days and 9 nights. If somebody travels, they usually say it's 9 days. Like 9 is just the number that they keep going back to. So, and the fact that it alliterates in the poems where it's mentioned, and their poetry is fundamentally alliterating, and lots of words start with N, may mean that it's no more significant than that, right? Because she says "Niu manakema niu ivatur," so that's alliterating on him. And when Vafthrudnir says he knows 9 realms below hell, he says Niu Hamar Nither. It's alliterating on N too. Yeah, Niu Kolmakema Fear Nivahel Nedon. So it may just be for poetic purposes. Okay, where are some other places? How about Vanahammer? I do think Vanahammer has a physical location. Remember the hint in Lokasena that when they are feasting with Aegir, they are west of Oscariden, and that is where Njordr was sent from when he became a hostage to the gods. So I think probably somewhere over here is Vanahammer. And it's a big question how important the Aesir-Vanir difference really is in the pre-Christian period, but it does seem to be some kind of valid classification. There is some kind of difference between them. There is some different place where there are beings more than Njordr who are called Vanir. There's not a ton of evidence left of this because Iceland is a very Aesir-centered culture apparently in the pre-Christian period. But for example, Snorri in the Prose Edda has a brief quote from one poem where Gnall, Freyg's messenger, flies over a bunch of unnamed Vanir, and the Vanir wonder what's flying over them. So there are other Vanir somewhere other than Njordr and his kids. They apparently live in this Vanahammer, which is apparently west of there somewhere. Where is, for example, Alvhammer? I don't know if it's even really a distinct thing. The notion that it was given to Freyr in his youth makes me think of it as perhaps more like a house or a hall, because sometimes houses or halls are called something. Svartalvahammer, since that's a place that one goes underground apparently to find dwarves, I suspect if that is conceived of as being somewhere, it's just one of these realms down here. It is not impossible, by the way, although you could probably write 2,000 words about it easy without ever getting to an answer. The dwarves could be undead, in which case Svartalvahammer being underground could be identified with the dwarves. When Thor meets the dwarf in Alvismal, he says, "You look very pale. Did you spend the night with a corpse?" And that's one of the few comments that we ever get about a dwarf's appearance. So it's possible that the dwarves are undead. In which case the underground thing could work. I don't want to get into the whole... Huh?
Zombie dwarves.
Zombie dwarves. Well, maybe. Right?
You went there.
I mean, we have so many words. Think about how many words we have that mean the same thing in modern English, right? House and residence. Hell in Ohio. Take that. I think the same way. They have lots of different ways about just saying bad supernatural thing, right? You know, Draugr, Troll, Risi, Thors, Jotun. I don't think they're classifying very much when they say this stuff. And I think that if there are borders of these conceptions, that they're super, super perforated. And in fact, when I'm trying to draw you this map, like, I don't know that I could show this to somebody 1,000 years ago and say, this is what you think, right? Like, this is still me trying to filter this through, right? I don't think there's actually necessarily a mental image that looks a lot like this. You know, we don't have any maps that survive from medieval Scandinavia. We do not know what a map they would draw would look like.
We also know that Vanaheimr is actually kind of a place because Herna and Mimir was sent there as the hostages after the war.
Correct. Snorri says in Gylfaginning that Hunir was sent to Vanaheimr when Njordr was sent to Osgard. And he says in Ynglinga Saga that Kvasir, or no, he says in Skullskaparmal that Kvasir was sent to. And then in Ynglinga Saga he gives a slightly different list where like Hunir is a Vanir. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely trade that goes between them. Okay. I feel nuttier every time I look at this.
It did make me want to order a soft pretzel.
For what?
The map. It made me want to order a soft pretzel.
One that's kind of twisted down here. Hey, I'm selling for meat creature. That's great. We should make a special on those. Call them like Midgardr soft pretzels or something. Or Jormungandr soft pretzels or something. Oh yeah, I forgot to draw one thing on the map for sure. Is, of course, it's this outer ocean. In which Jormungandr, the serpent, dwells. So when Thor in the Prose Edda or in Hemisphere goes to fish for Jormungandr, he is going into what they call, and it's really interesting because they do specifically, they don't talk about this and this with the same words. This is Ha, the ocean. This is in Djupisior, the deep sea. So this is conceived of as being sort of deeper than anything that we would consider. For example, when Thor goes to visit Utgard the Loki, actually this is maybe a good time to talk about this. Now I'm getting a little bit more disorganized, I'm sorry about that. Okay, this whole Eastern Road thing. Here is another one of my, woke, broke, bespoke things. Woke. Bifrost is the Aurora. Wrong. Lots of people say that. I was hearing that a lot because lots of people were saying the Aurora recently. Snorri explicitly says it's a rainbow. So, woke, it's a rainbow. Bespoke, it's also the Eastern Road. Because Snorri Sturluson in the Prose Edda does have some weird comments about where things are. And it's really hard to follow how he's putting this. Remember, we don't have a map drawn by anybody from medieval Scandinavia. We don't know what it would look like. I think the earliest surviving maps from Scandinavia are from like the 1600s. So we do not even know what this would look like. But he puts a lot of emphasis, if you read the right section of Gylfaginning in the Prose Edda, on the eastern end of Osgard. So if we kind of do the map maker thing and say area pictured in detail, say like East Osgard, the part that was kind of rough till the new mayor showed up and then it really got gentrified. Now there's like 10 coffee shops there where you can get a half-calf soy latte or whatever, right? But East Osgard, he says, includes two major places, or three major things. Hlidskjolf, so that is the chair that Odin sits on, where he, quote, sees over all the hames, okay, realms, villages, whatever. If he's on the eastern end and that's where the road is, then he would be seeing not just into Midgard, but also potentially like beyond it into Jotunheimr. Maybe down into hell. Maybe Bifrost keeps going into hell. Since no one ever finds the end, maybe it starts underground. It's just another random thought for you. Another place that's right there is Himmelbjörg. As a Norse trivia question, does anybody know who lives there? Whose hall is that? It alliterates. Heimdallr lives in Himmelbjörg. And what does he do from his hall? He watches all the realms. So apparently, East Asgarder has the opening to everything else. That's not only where Odin sits to watch everything, it's where Freyr goes to watch everything when he goes to see Gerður, the woman that he wants to woo in Jotunheimr. He goes to Hlithskjalf at the eastern end of Asgarder and he looks into Jotunheimr. And he sees her, and she is so bright that she illuminates all the Heimar. So there's some kind of like hole here that they can see through right around the eastern end. And then Snorri does explicitly say that the end of the bridge, Bifrost, is on the eastern end of Asgarder. So to come back to what I was saying right before the intermission, I think this is just where the access point is. This is where the opening is out of the dome, where they can see everything else and where their road leaves. And I kind of think that maybe this is this. When Thor is on the eastern road, it just means he's out of town, right? He's in his car. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some equivalent expression to use in modern English, but he's out. Yeah. Okay. I had another point that was just on the tip of my tongue when I said that. What was it? I'm trying to cram too much into this, right? Okay, questions, comments, criticisms, complaints, manifestos. I'm trying to get myself back on track. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, thank you. Me. The rivers. When the gods gather for their meetings, they gather at Yggdrasil, right? So how does Yggdrasil fit in, and how is it described? Because this is something that gets depicted all kinds of weird ways on the internet and in popular books. Very often, popular depictions of Norse cosmos have this enormous tree, Yggdrasil, that just runs through the middle of everything, and everything is kind of like coming off of it, like in different branches or something. I don't think that that represents the way they think about this. My picture of Yggdrasil, which I am not God's gift to Norse mythology, right? So you can disagree with this, but this is how I've come to think of this. I think Yggdrasil comes up in Asgarder. There's a beautiful, detailed depiction of Yggdrasil. Now, there's a common factoid that Yggdrasil has a root in every world. That's not ever explicitly stated. What it says in Grímnismál in the Poetica is one root. What's the quote? Þrjár rötter standa og þrjár veggar undan aski Yggdrasils. Hel bur undir eini, annarri hrímþursar, þriðju mennskir menn. 3 roots go in 3 directions under the ash Yggdrasil. Hell dwells under 1, so maybe it runs down the rim into Midgard or down into Hell. Hell dwells under 1. Under another are the Jotuns, so that could be a route that runs along the outside and then down into Jotunheimr. And under the third, humans. So that could just be the route that's in Asgarder, because anything in Asgarder is above us in this conception. See what I'm saying? But when the gods gather to meet at Yggdrasil, Thor, who is always away, right? When the gods get together, Thor's never hang out. He's always busy. Right, like in Locusina, when the gods have a feast, everybody's there, all the gods and all the elves, whatever exactly elves are. But Thor's not, because Thor is out on the eastern road, he's fighting trolls. So when Thor comes home, it's stated in Greenismal and in the prose edit that he has to wade a bunch of rivers. So there's water that's somewhere on his route other than just the ocean that he has to cross. If Osgarther is just floating on a cloud above us or something, my take on Ohio was so hot the fire department is showing up. They're going nowhere. So what's this? If it's just a cloud, then it doesn't make any sense to go to rivers, right? But what if Thor is like out here? What if Thor is like climbing the dome or something? I'm not necessarily saying this is the idea, but maybe this explains what the rivers are about. Because it says he has to wade a whole bunch of rivers, and it gives names for all of them. There's one called Kormt, there's one called Ormt, and there's two called Kerlau. Where are the rivers? Are they like on this part of the dome? Or are they out here, like somewhere kind of like in obscure, out there borderlands of Midgard or something like that? I don't know. But he has to go over water, and Bifrost explicitly is a crossing over water. The word they use for it is bru, bridge. And Snorri says that if you fall off of it, you fall into water. And so the Jotuns don't cross it because the red part of the rainbow, I don't know if you know this weird little factoid about Norse myth, but the red part is fire. So Bifrost is canonically a burning bridge. So the gods can cross it, but their enemies can't. So Thor wades rather than uses Bifrost. Where is he doing that? I don't know. But it could be that those rivers are on the outside of the dome and that he is somehow taking like a different eastern road, like up this way. But by the way, should probably be winding down fairly soon. Jotunheimr is not just east. What do I say to support that? Surtur, when he comes to fight the gods of Ragnarok, comes from the south, not from the east. And you could say that's where Muspelheimr is. Okay, maybe. If Muspelheimr is really something distinct from Jotunheimr. When Skirnir goes to court Gerður, he goes south, even though Freyr looks east to see her. Okay, so that's something that's south. And then at least one time, and I'm sorry that I can't remember the exact story from this, but sometimes I can't remember every single detail. One of the stories in the prose edda when Thor and Loki go to Jotunheimr, they wind up north. So it's at least northwest and south, I think. I don't remember there's ever a time when it's west, but it seems to at least be in multiple directions around us that way. And Snorri does say in the prose edda, the world is encircled on the outside. So when he says the world here, he means the part we live on. And around it lies the deep sea. And on that seashore, the gods gave lands for the families of Jotuns to dwell. Maybe kind of connecting to what you were saying about family. Because Jotunheimr, by the way, is always plural. The one time, it's another weird little factoid, the one time in the Poetic Edda that I can remember it being singular, Jotunheimr rather than Jotunheimar, is in the line Gnir allar Jotunheimr, where only the singular would work in the meter. So it is canonically plural. There are many Jotun villages, whatever, not one. So he says explicitly, we are encircled by it there, and it's along the seashores that the Jotuns live. Yeah, that's the extent of that comment. But somewhere in my notebooks, I probably have half the Poetic Edda and the prose I've written out my hand. It's probably an insane project, but that's how I get things together. How was that? Does that make sense? As much sense as it can make? For Mark.
Oh, no, it's about to flop.
Oh. Question comes.
You had said that whether that's where the name of the game came from, the Skyer.
Oh yeah, probably, maybe.
But here's something stupid I read. It was in Dark Quarter.
Yeah.
You know the Icelandic skier, yogurt, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about it, if it's Skyrim, it's land of yogurt, land of skier.
The door is theirs.
I'll be here all week.
Other questions, comments, criticisms, complaints, or manifestos? This crowd is light on manifestos, and I kind of appreciate that. That has not been true every month.
Yes.
That was not even true last month. But, oh,
Not like, not stock related, but, since I always miss the December one, do we keep going into 2026?
I don't think we have plans to stop this.
Correct, okay.
I am astonished that we have now done this by my count 23 times.
Yeah? Let's see.
No, I mean, like, that's amazing. Yeah, September 23 was a one-time thing.
Right.
And then it became every month in like January 24th,
Yeah,
I
you're
think
right.
is what it was.
Yep.
So I think it's 23 times. It's an amazing testament to Mead Creek. Also,
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
we should probably, I just want to say, and I'll say it with you here even, we should probably be slightly better about getting out of here closer to when Mead Creek hypothetically closes. Because I feel like sometimes we run up being here fairly late. So I'm going to try to be better about that.
It's all good.
Well, I don't want to send all you folks home. I felt bad about it a couple times.
Now, if it gets too late, we'll start being grumbly.
Okay. Well, we have fantastic prizes. What are our prizes?
Yes, so we have honey, we have bee creamer, we have a 375, our traditional mead, and then we have the grand prize of Dr. Crawford's new book.
Whoa.
And then I also want you to plug for this at the end.
Okay. Well,
Can I do
I'll
it
just
now?
go ahead and say it.
Okay.
These are the party favors from our wedding reception. They include a small original watercolor by Lauren. Each one has an original
They're
one.
beautiful.
And there are some little flower seeds. So if you would like to take a little bit of our life with you, please take one. There's a bowl in the back.
Yeah, what idea?
Okay, I did write down some questions. Believe it or not, you're legitimately shocked.
It only took 23 times.
And
Okay.
I arranged them by difficulty.
Lauren, you've been great for
Can
him.
you believe it?
Okay,
So-
before you start, let's make sure everyone understands. Raise your hands. If I can't see you, can you get in a place where I can if you want to answer questions and win prizes?
Best
Is
selling.
it the same whereas like the first two questions are for, you have like the grand prize?
This
Like
is grand prize.
grand prize is the book. Alright.
Yeah, so your first prize is,
Okay, so the first question, the prize is the honey, right? We're going in order, honey, mead, book.
and your questions get more difficult.
Yeah, so if you're feeling really lucky, wait till the last one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but raise your hand, don't shout it out, unless you're the best-selling author of the Dog Stores.
This happened.
I don't see you here.
You did
Never
it, what,
came
3
back
times?
after he never fought that lady.
I know, you're right.
I'm trying to
Okay.
make sure I can see everybody.
So, first question. What's the name of the horse that the giant builder has?
Slate, oh wait, no, that's the, no, I thought you were gonna say the one that spawned. Slate. Wait.
It's not the name of the horse that the giant builder has, right? That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
The horse that helps the builder of the wall.
Brady.
Swallow feeder? Swallow feeder?
Oh, that's so close. So close.
I don't know who's next.
Roll a die, flip a coin.
Right? But yeah, do you have a dad? Actually, you've won a lot. I'm gonna go back. Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Swallow Farrell?
Yeah, all right, that's close.
Excellent,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay,
All right,
that turned out to be hard.
it did turn out to be.
Okay.
And here's me, if you win and you'd rather have honey because you're not a drinker, totally fine. Okay. So I'm gonna try to pay attention when hands are over.
This is sort of a long form, but I think it's sort of medium difficulty. All right, so what is probably, at least according to the account that I've given here, or any plausible alternative account you want to give me, the reason for this talk about 9 worlds?
The nine worlds or 9 Heimer's homes, villages, are likely realms that exist under the realm of hell, that you die into from hell.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why why that 9 number comes up with Hammer times. All right.
I'm so glad you wanted it. Makes me feel better.
Okay, now this is what I think is the tough one. Give me a cognate of English home, Old Norse hammer, German Heim, Swedish ham, other than a Germanic language, right? What is a cognate of home from another language? You got a taker?
Yeah.
Keyless.
I think it's worth a book. Yeah.
You got it.
Right, that's correct. That is Lithuanian Verdict. Do you speak Lithuanian?
No.
Spanish.
Just a really good listener.
Yeah, I'm a good listener.
Hey, that's awesome. Okay, other questions, remarks, criticism, complaints, manifestos? We do this every month, and the next time we're going to do it the second to last Wednesday again, so
Yeah.
not do it on Christmas
The
Eve.
17th of
17th.
December, tickets are on sale right now. We're also doing the Yule Fest on the 20th. So,
Okay.
Interstate bites night.
Say it again?
Steak bites night?
Oh, yes, we're doing a steak bite night. Roger is gonna be grilling the night before Thanksgiving.
Night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we're doing a meat pairing and steak bites and chocolates and cheese.
Yeah, pair it up. The brewers are gonna put together flights and pair up our,
Okay, well, sweet. Well, the Mead Krieger family is a wonderful family. Please support them, buy mead, buy books, buy food. There's pork sandwiches now.
yeah.
And thanks, everybody. And I'll be hanging out for a while. And until next time, all the best.